All right, what's going on, everybody? This is Peter Renna back with another edition of Dollar Bin Digging here for comicbookinvest.com, where you can catch the article every Friday. And I do this little video that I put on my YouTube channel as well as over on Tales from the Flip Side every week, so you can check it out here or there, whatever your fancy. Now, it's no secret that I love most things 80s. That's the decade that I grew up in, so I'm kind of, focused on that a lot of times. And just for fun this week, I thought it would be fun to go back and look at some of these cartoon properties from the 80s. Now, it's not just cartoons. We're talking cartoons, comics, and in a lot of cases like games and stuff, because that was a decade when things just kind of spread out across most media in some form or another. So, I don't know. Hopefully you like this list, and, let's dive right into it and see what we got. Now, if you follow me at all or saw my my toy videos, you'll see that last weekend I did a Dungeons & Dragons toy video because I was curious about those toys. I recall them and I wanted to look back into them. Now, as you know, Dungeons & Dragons is a popular, role-playing game that everybody knows. I personally really remember it mostly for these, choose-your-own-adventure books I used to read a lot when I was younger, and picked up a couple so this way I can get my son into them, hopefully. But outside of that, there was, a cartoon series that wasn't half bad. It didn't last for very long. I think it might have only been one season, but I was entertained by it. I mean, dragons, fantasy, sorcerers, wizards, that kind of thing, I'm down. But this obviously was a comic book as well. Now, this series, as Advanced Dungeons & Dragons run, it's, it doesn't do much all in all. Only really issue 1 actually has any interest and value these days. But, just keep an eye out for these because these are just fun books. But again, issue 1 is the one you'll probably want to look out for. You see there's Centaur, you got all kinds of different magical, characters, paladins, and what have you there. Fun little series. It only lasted about 36 issues, which I know it sounds only 36 issues, but for back then, that wasn't very long. I mean, we're talking a lot of, runs that go in the hundreds. But, yeah, so you can find most of those Dungeons & Dragons cartoon comic books, in the cheap boxes. There's only, again, like I said, 36 issues and I think an annual in that DC run. But it later got revived. I think IDW got a hold of the property, and there's some pretty cool comics that came out of that as well. Some multiple covers and some variants. So that's also something you might want to keep an eye out for. Just you may not recognize most of this stuff, but when you're flipping through them, you just look, IDW does a good job of letting you know what the covers are. So just, take a look and look for those RIs, and those are the retailer incentives. So most of those, maybe they don't do too much, but it's still better if you can find it for $1 or less. Just grab it because it's an incentive. You never know. Maybe you find a rare one. So that's just kind of the weird, things that you should be keeping an eye out for when you're digging in those cheap bins, especially with IDW books. So Dungeons & Dragons is my first pick. So we're going to move on with our next selection, which is Silverhawks. Now, this was a pretty fun toy line as well from that same time period. There was a cartoon. Again, I don't think it lasted very long, as most cartoons back then didn't really go much more than a season or two. But the toy line was pretty fun. I mean, they were very shiny. I remember they had a lot of sheen to them. They're very glossy, and they kind of stood out. Yes, these characters looked familiar. I mean, if you look at this setup, it looks a lot like Darkhawk. So keep that in mind. Like, Darkhawk looks like he might have been a little bit inspired by our Silverhawks here. But that's it. It's still a pretty cool line, and Darkhawk's kind of a cool character too. So obviously keep an eye out for him as well. But I'm probably going to cover these toys at some point in my top 10 toy videos. Getting around to it. Again, there's a ton of toys, especially from the 80s, that I'd love to cover. I know I need to branch out, do some more, hit some stuff from the 90s, a little bit more recent stuff. I even got some older stuff, some of the stuff from the 60s and 70s in the hopper as well. But, I only got so much time. So one a week is all you're really going to get. We'll get around to this stuff eventually. So keep an eye out for Silverhawks eventually. But for the comic books, you want to keep an eye out, obviously, for issue 1, because that's the one that would, draws a lot of people's interest. Everybody looks for the first issues of the series like this. It only ran for about 7 issues, so it's not a very long run. It's one that you could, collect pretty easily if you go out and, are pretty mindful of what you're looking for. So 7 issues isn't too hard to complete when you think about it. Now, newsstands obviously commanding a premium these days because people are looking for those newsstand copies. So if you find one of those, you might be able to get a little bit extra for it if you're looking to, to flip it or move it. And another little item you might want to keep an eye out for, you may not find it in boxes because these kind of things stand out, but this series did come in a comic pack that did have issues 1, 2, and 3, I believe, in it. And these sealed comic packs, sometimes do rather well. I think like this pack you can get, probably a 70, 80 bucks for one if you find it. So those are just kind of weird oddities that you might find out there at flea markets or garage sales, just stuff that's just thrown around. It could be an unopened comic pack of Silverhawks, and just keep an eye out for it. It could be very, very cheap. So that's another title and cartoon that you might want to just check out if you haven't seen it before. So we're going to move this train on to our next property we're going to look at is M.A.S.K, Mobile Armored Strike Command with a K. I know, it's a stretch, but the 80s, we loved our acronyms. Now, M.A.S.K was another great toy line. It was basically vehicles that transformed into other vehicles. Cars became flying cars, and trucks became tanks, and it's just like a Transformer in a sense, but not really. They just kind of altered the from one vehicle to another. They came with these pretty cool little figures, and they all had masks, which was part of the or helmets really, but that was kind of the shtick that they were going with. Again, I love this toy line. I'll probably cover it at some point too on Top 10 Toys. But for now, we're going to look at the comics you should be looking out for. There was a preview book. It's kind of like a teaser, almost like an ash can, I guess you could say. It looked like it's all just newsprint. It doesn't even really have a cover. So you never know. That could be just tucked away in a box somewhere. So you just pull it out and just grab it. I found plenty of like freebies and things like that just buried in dollar boxes. And, it's worth $1 because a lot of that stuff's not easy to find, these days. But once again, you're obviously going to be looking for number 1. And this number 1, it was part of a mini-series that first started off. And I think it only ran for about 4 issues. But in addition to just finding number 1, which, of course, people will probably look at newsstand a little bit, you also want to look for the Canadian price variant on this one because that one does a little bit better as well. As you can see, the regular cover price is 75 cents. But on the Canadian ones, it's 95 cents. Just, price differential, a little bit of a currency exchange. So keep an eye out for the Canadian edition of it because that also moves for a bit of a premium. And like I said, it was a 4-issue miniseries to start. So any one of those 4 is just kind of fun to grab. It's not very long. And then you got into the regular kind of ongoing series here as well. So you might want to keep an eye out for it. You can find those in boxes as well. Another one of these, I just saw one that sold just randomly for like 18 bucks or something, was what is this? I think this is issue 8. And I think there's only 9 issues in even the second run. But this issue 8, I just got, as a little robot there watching the girls playing volleyball or beach, playing with the beach ball there. It's just one of those covers, almost like the Archie collectors would probably be interested in a book like this. So, if you see it, I'd grab it because that's another one you can just probably flip. But you're really looking for, again, that first issue. Once again, IDW, it's another property they got a hold of, and there's rumors they might be doing like a larger scope Hasbro type of deal where they cross over ROM and M.A.S.K and all of these crazy properties that they picked up from the 80s. But the IDW series, maybe it's out there too in the cheap bins. I don't know if there's a lot of people buying it. I remember when they came out, but I don't see these a lot in the dollar bins near me. But I would look for them just to kind of check out this series because I don't know much about it apart from I know in that first run, there was a pretty cool Paul Pope cover that I really kind of wanted, but it just was out of my price range at the time, so I just never got a hold of it. But it's still kind of cool. So that IDW series again is one you might just find out there. So keep an eye out for that too. But it's really that original DC run that's going to is the one I'm looking at for today. So we got one more book, and that next book that we're looking at is Space Ace. I recently found a few of these in a 50-cent bin at a shop near me, and that's also another reason why it got me thinking about this topic. It wasn't just doing the Dungeons & Dragons toy video, but it was finding these Space Ace books. So trying to put that together, put the two concepts together is kind of how I got to these 80s cartoon kind of theme here. And while Space Ace had a very, very short-lived animated little thing that they did, this is more well known, I think, for the old game. There was like that old cabinet game that you could play in arcades that was damn near impossible to get through. I never understood it, and it was always super expensive. You had to like time everything right. I just couldn't do it. And I also heard that there's a Laserdisc game too, but I didn't have a Laserdisc player growing up, so I don't know much about it. So we were strictly VCR, no Laserdiscs in my house, so did not have that. But this is still a series that's kind of cool. I mean, it's Don Bluth. It's got that familiar look. It's kind kind of has that same tie. They got some toys out there that you can also get, some classic little little nuggets. And even the game has been ported over to a lot of different other systems over the years. I know the old Commodores and think had like a hard disk version that you could play, and it even went up through Super Nintendo had a video game version, which is kind of cool. It's not exactly the same as that original game, but it's still kind of fun nonetheless. And again, this is from the same Don Bluth creator. He also has that Dragon's Lair property that I know is getting a little bit heat as well because of I think Ryan Reynolds is possibly attached to do something with that somewhere down the line. But that said, these Space Ace books are kind of interesting. There's actually two different versions of it. There was the this first run that was actually done through CrossGen. They did 3 issues of this series, and this is the same kind of run. They actually did a He-Man series as well, but CrossGen did these first 3 issues of Space Ace, and then they actually went over to Arcana. I think Arcana Publishing was the one who picked it up after that, and they basically reprinted issues 1, 2, and 3, and followed it up with another 3 issues. Now, that first run also had a pretty hard to find graham cracker variant that's out there, so you might want to keep an eye out for that. I don't know if you can find it in a cheap box, but even you can find that online for cheap. Think about scooping it up, because that thing can move for a couple $100 if it's out there. It doesn't come up very often. A lot of those old graham cracker variants, especially with the those cross-gen books, it was almost like the same He-Man books that had that Fakor cover. Pretty expensive, pretty hard to come by, so just keep an eye out for that. But his entire run's kind of fun. Prices are kind of inconsistent. Some get really expensive, and then sometimes you can find them on the cheap, if you're looking online. But keep an eye, again, on those cheap boxes, again, for both the Space Ace here, as well as those Dragon's Lair books that I mentioned, because those are definitely on the hotter side right now, because people, again, are looking for them, because it's soon to be adapted, or possibly adapted. So it's got a little bit of interest and a little bit of heat behind it, but it's not just, again, the first issue in this case, because issue 6, like the final issue of the series, published through Arcana, is also kind of tough to find, and not seeing a lot of sales, but the asking prices are pretty steep. I think it's $40 to $50, I think, out there. People are asking for it. So if you find it, that's a nice little return, especially if you can find it in a 50-cent box like I did. So with that, that's what I got this week for these. Just a quick little fun little 80s look back, a little throwback. So hopefully you enjoyed those picks. Please like and subscribe to my channel, as well as Tales from the Flip Side. Bookmark comicbookinvest.com, because check out all the articles we got dropping there. Not just mine. I mean, fellas are doing a bang-up job every week. So every day there's new stuff being dropped on the site, as well as new stuff hitting the Tales from the Flip Side YouTube channel. So check that out as well. I put out as much as I can on my personal channel, but what I put out there is usually on both Flip Side and on mine. It's just, if you want to view some stuff on mine, like this video, if you hang in during the post credits here, I have like one more honorable mention I'll throw your way if you're watching it on mine. So with that said, I will see you guys all next week. All right, so thanks for hanging in there and watching this on my channel, where you can get your one or more extra picks that I like to throw your way in this week's honorable mention. If you can't guess by the background, this is a pretty hot book, actually. So this is one you definitely want to keep an eye out for. Now, this Thundercats #1 is again, like I said, it's moving pretty steady. It's gotten pretty hot over the last couple of months as people have started to gain a little bit of a interest in Thundercats. I know they were bringing back a new animated series. I don't know if there's anything else going on with the property, but it is a great and is a classic classic toy line and a classic cartoon. It's classic in every sense of the word. So it's right up there with the Masters of the Universes, the Transformers, and G.I. Joes in a lot of people's estimation. So this is definitely a comic you should keep an eye out for that #1. You got the regular Star Edition right here that I'm showing you, and then there's a newsstand, because again, these days everybody's kind of looking at newsstands with a little bit of rose-colored glasses, and they just want that extra little bit of extra collectability, I guess. And yeah, that, again, if you can find it, maybe you can get a little bit of a premium on it. But the other thing you want to look out for as well, much like the Silverhawks I mentioned before, there's a comic pack that has this this shown in it. So that's one of those sealed things that you can find. Maybe not find, but not easy to find, but something to keep an eye out for. But the sealed comic pack does pretty well too. So this is something you might want to, again, keep your eye open for, because you never know what else could be in there. I think in those, they're kind of loose, so you kind of move the bag around, but it's the Thundercats that's really going to drive you to pick this one up. So again, this isn't a secret. So finding this in a cheap bin is probably not going to be that easy. At this point, would probably grab most of the run. I don't think there's a lot of issues. I think there's maybe 14. I don't know. I don't know how long the run ran for, but I don't really think it was that long. So keep an eye out for the whole thing. Those last issues usually can go for a little bit extra because they're harder to find, lower printed. So definitely keep an eye out for those. But number one, look for the Thundercats, because it could be worth your time if you can find one. All right. See you guys next time.